When selling a house, if a death occurred within 3 years of the house going on the market, the seller is required to inform potential buyers of said death. This little requirement wasn't necessary in my case. Everyone within a 50-mile radius seemed to know about Victoria Teller. It was a tragic story. She had given birth to a bouncing baby boy, whose father no one seemed to know. The baby passed away just a few months later, and Victoria took her own life a year after that. That much was known to be true. What was unknown were the circumstances surrounding the incident, how the baby died. Some said accident, some said illness, others said murder. The circumstances surrounding how Victoria killed herself and what happened in between remain ominous. The popular rumor was that Victoria, in her grief-stricken psychosis, began buying dolls to replace her dearly departed son. The doll would then suffer the same fate as the real baby in her mind, and she would bury it and move on to another. People, mostly teenagers, made it a Halloween tradition to search for the doll graveyard. They searched the backyard and the woods behind it, but nothing was found in the 6 years that the house was empty. I was confident that the house that I had bought for my family and me had nothing strange in its history but 2 tragic deaths. The first few months living in the Teller house were uneventful. I had to occasionally shoo away curious locals that weren't aware that our house was no longer empty, but I found no ghosts or satanic symbols or anything of the like. It seemed that it was just a house, one that I got a huge discount on because of what happened there and the bad juju it was rumored to have acquired because of it. By the time the Christmas season rolled around, I had pretty much forgotten about Victoria Teller. It was the first year that my son Caleb was really aware of anything other than presents. We lined the roof and windows with lights, hung a wreath on the door, and put some standing decorations on the lawn. We bought and decorated a tree big enough to fit a toy store underneath, which was appropriate because of how many presents Santa was going to bring Caleb that year. He was getting more excited each day, especially since we had been dropping hints that he was getting a puppy. My family was the happiest it had ever been, until a week before Christmas. My wife had been wrapping presents as we bought them so that we didn't have to stay up all night on Christmas Eve like we had in previous years. She had opened the door to the closet that held the presents to find the wrapping paper torn to shreds. Her first thought was that Caleb had gotten into them, but I doubted that he would be able to contain his excitement if he had. It looked almost as if some sort of rodents had shredded the paper, but the boxes weren't damaged at all. We brushed it off as a mystery and moved the presents to the attic after rewrapping them. I occasionally heard some shuffling from inside the closet, but I never saw whatever critter had caused it. I figured I would call an exterminator after Christmas to check inside the walls. Soon, things started to get really strange. I walked into the bathroom to find the dirty clothes scattered around the room and the hamper on its side. My wife found the refrigerator door hanging open, with food torn up and thrown on the floor. Caleb was distraught one morning when he woke up to find all of the toys that he had carefully placed in his toy box the night before had been thrown all around his room while he was asleep. All this and the noises in the walls were getting more frequent and were heard everywhere in the house. My superstitious wife was becoming scared that the local urban legend was true. That Victoria Teller still haunted the house. She reasoned that the spirit was becoming more active because we were so happily preparing for the holiday with our son, something she never got to do. I laughed at her theory, although I shouldn't have. Christmas Eve, my wife and I put Caleb to bed. We had to return in his room several times to tell him that if he didn't go to sleep, Santa wouldn't be bringing anything. When I was convinced that he was finally going to stay in his room, I picked the puppy up from my mother's house and brought it home. We hadn't named him yet, but he was a golden retriever puppy that was as energetic as he was soft and fluffy. After playing with him for a while, we put him to bed in his crate, ate the cookies Caleb left for Santa, and turned in for the night. I was jerked from my slumber by a blood-curdling scream. My wife and I followed our son's cries for help to the living room. Caleb had snuck out of bed and found the puppy. Instead of that fluffy ball that we had left by the tree, he found a mangled metal crate filled and surrounded by fur, blood, and chunks of discarded meat. My wife took Caleb into another room to console him, while I checked for intruders and signs of a break-in. I found nothing, so I returned to the living room and began cleaning up the mess. I was kneeling on the floor, convincing myself that there was a silver lining in the fact that we had hardwood floors instead of carpet, when I heard a tinkling noise come from the tree. I turned my head just in time to see a pair of big blue eyes staring at me from the branches. I jumped to my feet and backed up a few paces just as the first doll dropped from the tree. It was followed by 3 others. They were those delicate porcelain dolls, wearing what were probably pretty little dresses at one time. I couldn't tell, because the dresses were covered in dirt and blood. I watched with a mixture of terror and disbelief as all 4 dolls slowly rose from the ground and started toward me. The screams of my wife and son snapped me out of my horrified trance. The dolls' heads turned as I ran from the room to find my family. I raced up the stairs to my bedroom, where I found my wife standing on our bed with Caleb in her arms. Dozens of porcelain dolls, varying in states of damage and filth, were standing on the floor surrounding the bed. They were making their way toward my loved ones, with their tiny arms stretched out, reaching for the woman and child who were desperately trying to stay away. I started kicking the little demons out of the way as I hurried to the rescue of my wife and child. I didn't think a bunch of fucking dolls would be so hard to push through, but I was wrong. For every one that I kicked away, 4 more came at me. They grabbed and pulled and thrashed and bit, and I found myself moving away from the bed instead of toward it. After noticing that most of the dolls had directed their attention to me, I yelled for my wife to run. I hoped that I served as enough of a distraction for the demon toys that her and Caleb could get away unharmed. The dolls that were still trying to reach them were clinging to the sides of the bed, climbing with delicate little hands. My wife jumped off the bed, stumbled and fell. Caleb's head hit the floor, and the resulting cries caught the attention of many of the dolls I was desperately trying to fight off and keep away. My wife tried to right herself and gather our son before the wave of small monsters got to them, but she was too slow. I watched as the dolls quickly swarmed Caleb and began tearing at his flesh. My wife was trying to get them away, but they turned on her when Caleb stopped thrashing. I made my way to them just as my wife stopped fighting. I saw the despair in her eyes as a doll with black hair and a gray tattered dress bit a chunk from her throat. The creatures moved so fast. There were so many of them. We didn't stand a chance. I don't know how long I stood in my bedroom, watching a horde of dolls ripping apart the 2 people I loved most in the world, before I realized that I was no longer being attacked. Every porcelain creature was crowded around what was left of my wife and son, feasting on them. I've regretted what I did next every day since. I ran. I bounded down the steps as fast as my feet would carry me. I reached the front door when I heard a woman's voice come from the 2nd floor.
"That's right, my children. Fill those bellies so you can grow big and strong."
I shut the door behind me and fell down the steps of the front porch. After vomiting up the cookies I had eaten earlier that night, I turned to look at the house. Peeking out of the window, illuminated by the colorful Christmas lights, was a gaunt woman wearing a tattered black dress. She smiled through a veil of stringy hair as the doll climbed up the front of her dress and into her arms. Then she closed the curtain. My name is Sophia Radcliffe, and I'm a retired social worker with the Ministry of Children and Family Development. I'm only writing this because I'm no longer working with the ministry and have no obligation to keep my personal experiences to myself. I will not use real names to protect the identity of the survivors. I have been given permission to share this story by my former client, Mrs. Sanderson, who is the only other person who knows the truth. In the winter of 2003, I was given a case that would be the deciding factor in entering my early retirement. I had been a social worker for 14 years by this point, and I honestly believed I had seen it all. But this case was interesting, to say the least. The 6-year-old girl that I was going to be working with had just been placed in the psychiatric ward of a nearby hospital, and I was to meet with her every week until she was considered well enough to be moved to a foster home. The following information is what I can share from her case file, news reports, and the research that followed. The girl's father was a lieutenant in the military and had been overseas when she was born, unaware of her existence until he came home to find his wife with a 2-year-old girl. Unfortunately, Lieutenant Alan Blake returned with severe post-traumatic stress disorder and had begun to suffer from paranoia, believing that his wife had cheated on him, and the girl wasn't even his own daughter. His wife, Catherine, tried everything she could think of to convince him, even going so far as to take the family to get a paternity test, but by then, the damage had been done. In his attempts to overlook his crumbling mental health, Alan took to heavy drinking and pushed himself away from his family, occasionally interacting with his wife, though he ignored the girl completely. According to their family doctor, Catherine regularly brought her daughter in for checkups, and he had suspected that she was being abused. However, with the mother saying everything was alright and having no proof that the bruises were anything other than playtime injuries, the doctors kept quiet and decided to simply keep an eye on them. I remember hearing the news story just a few nights before, on Christmas Eve, about a man who had attacked his wife and daughter with the knife they had used to carve the turkey. A neighbor reported that he had been watching for his brother and sister-in-law to come for dinner, and noticed that the power in the Blake home suddenly went out, and that the only source of light was from the fireplace in the living room. Wanting to be helpful, the neighbor headed over with a couple of flashlights and candles, but stopped when he saw a strange-looking man in a suit standing in the living room with Catherine, who was holding the poker to the fireplace, covered in blood. Horrified, he ran back to his home and called the police. When the police arrived at the scene, Alan was dead, having been beaten to death with the poker, and Catherine herself was bleeding out, with over 20 cuts on her body, screaming about a thin man that had broken into her home before she died of a sudden heart attack. The girl seemed to be unharmed, though highly disturbed by the events, and was brought to the hospital for further monitoring, just in case. 9 years passed, and the girl, named Kenna, had long been released and sent to all kinds of homes in an attempt to find a family that could help her with her unusual symptoms. She had been diagnosed with paranoia and schizophrenia, and was still unable to bear looking in the mirror for fear of seeing the figure that had haunted her since her parents' death. I remember one day when she told me that if she did look in the mirror long enough, she could hear him whispering to her, though when I asked what he was saying, she refused to say another word. It was on Kenna's 15th birthday that I told her I found a family that was willing to take her in and help her keep healthy. I had been visiting with them for weeks, scheduled and unscheduled, so that I could see them at their best as well as their worst, and was confident I had found a good fit. Mrs. Sanderson had a well-kept home, a 19-year-old daughter named Gwen, and 2 sons, Heath and Paul, aged 17 and 16 respectively. The family was fully prepared for her, adding another bed to Gwen's room and clearing the one side of posters and belongings so that Kenna could have her own space. To my pleasant surprise, they had even gone so far as to install small curtains over all the mirrors in the house so they could be easily covered when they were not in use, to minimize the chances of her having a breakdown. After her birthday lunch, I took Kenna to the Sandersons' place, made sure she had all her things, and reminded her to make sure she took her medication. We sat and talked with her new foster mother and siblings as it was Sunday afternoon and most of them were home. They all seemed to hit it off well, and I took my leave once Kenna told me she had unpacked. I told her I would continue visiting for a while until I knew for sure whether it's going to work or not, and that I would be in touch. After 4 months, I closed her file. Everyone makes mistakes, and after reading Kenna's diary that was recovered, I know just how wrong I was. These are just a few of the entries, though almost every day was disturbing to read. February 23rd, 2012. Dear Diary, I'm starting to think Miss Radcliffe made a mistake when she left me here. Mrs. Sanderson is okay, I guess, but Heath and Paul are horrible, and I'm not even sure Gwen is human. How can someone be such a nightmare? She wouldn't stop complaining that she had to cover her mirror with ugly curtains, and she's refusing to leave it covered. It points right at my bed, and I saw him again, hovering over me, watching me with his empty face. I screamed. I couldn't help it. All she did was call her brothers in so they could all laugh at me. I hate them. I'm just glad they haven't found you. Love, Kenna. March 17th, 2012. Dear Diary, while Mrs. Sanderson was out today, Heath and Paul jumped out at me, dressed like what they think the Thin Man looks like. I shouldn't have told them anything. Gwen thought it was hilarious, of course, and took it one step further. She told them to hold me down while she sat on me. She's really heavy, and made me look in her handheld mirror for 10 whole minutes before they got bored and wandered off. He's getting closer. I wonder what's going to happen if he catches me. I don't know, but at this rate, it'll probably be better than staying here. Love, Kenna. April 30th, 2012. Dear Diary, I had that dream again about the night my parents died. And when I first saw the Thin Man, I was looking at the ornaments on the tree, the pretty red ones that were my favorite, and I saw Daddy standing there with a knife, looking at Mom, the Thin Man standing behind him, saying something in his ear. I can see Mom grab the poker and force it through Daddy's head, and keep beating him until there was only chunks left. She told me it would be okay, that it wouldn't hurt anymore. I think that's when she saw the Thin Man, watching her with those long black wisps coming off his back and picking up the knife. I saw him cut her up, but I couldn't turn around. I could only see it through the reflection in the ornament. That's when the police show up and take me to their car, where I stay sitting by myself until the big black bags Mom and Daddy are in come out on the stretchers. In the dream, I'm looking through the rearview mirror, and the Thin Man is looking back. Why won't that dream stop? I don't want to think about it anymore. I'm going to go downstairs and get some water. Good night. Love, Kenna. May 3rd, 2012. Dear Diary, it's been 3 days since Mrs. Sanderson said I'm doing well enough that she thinks it's time to take the curtains down. There must be a mirror in every room now, and whenever I walk by I can see him. I've been trying to cover them back up, but whenever I get close enough I see him waiting for me. I'm scared that if I don't cover them up, he'll find me. I'm gonna go try again. Wish me luck. Love, Kenna. May 4th, 2012. Dear Diary, I hate them. I hate them all. If Mrs. Sanderson didn't get rid of those stupid curtains, that wouldn't have happened. Yesterday, Gwen said she was sorry, and that she was only mad that she had to share her room. She told Heath and Paul to help her get rid of the mirrors. They went to all the rooms and pulled them all down so I didn't have to, and put them in the basement. My medication makes me a really heavy sleeper, and I guess she noticed, because I woke up to find the room covered with all the mirrors in the house. They even put one on the back of the door so I couldn't come out. They were everywhere. Everywhere. He doesn't have eyes, but I know he was looking at me. He was looking and coming closer, and he was right in front of me. I could hear him, just like I did before. But he's wrong. I couldn't do anything like that. I'm not like my parents. When Mrs. Sanderson came home, she heard me screaming and I got in trouble. She yelled at me. She hit me. She told me I was being childish and needed to grow up and stop pretending there was a monster in the mirror. I hate them, but I can't do it. I can't. I can't. I'm not like that. I can't. I'm not like my parents. I'm not. I can't. Why won't it stop? I think I need a nap or something. Kenna. June 19th, 2012. Don't look. He's coming. Don't look. He's coming. Don't look. He's coming. July 31st, 2012. I'm in the hospital, so tired. I don't remember what happened, but I think I heard Gwen. Everyone's mad at me. I need to tell the nurse to cover the mirror. Why hasn't anyone covered the mirror? Why is he standing there? He isn't coming for me, but he's laughing. I think he's pleased that I hurt her, or amused. The doctor prescribed a higher dose. I need sleep. August 4th, 2012. She's moving out. Gwen is going to college now, and she's finally moving out at the end of the month, so she can stay with her best friend while they're going to school. I wish I could enjoy it more, but the meds have been really harsh lately. I'm always tired, and I keep on blacking out. I think I've been sleepwalking too, because sometimes I wake up with grass and stuff on my feet. Maybe with Gwen gone, things will get better, but I doubt it. I just hope she doesn't pull another stunt to make up for leaving. September 13th, 2012. He's here. I can't see him, but he can see me. He's never leaving, and I know he's here for me. He won't leave. He can't leave. He won't leave. Please, don't leave me. He isn't leaving. It's just him and me. Just me and him. He's always been there. The only one that's ever been there. Kenna had a fondness for writing in purple ink, her writing neat and tiny with little circles to dot the I's. It was a normal girl's diary, except that no one saw her as a normal girl. Her classmates saw her as the crazy girl who saw weird things and screamed at her own reflection. The girl with no real family or friends, except maybe me, but I left her. While the whole diary itself was difficult for me to read, it was the last entry that I found most unnerving. Spread across 2 pages, and so far as the police have told me, written in the blood of her own foster family. October 26th, 2012. Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday, dear Kenna. It's just what I've always wanted. Mrs. Sanderson was the only survivor, having been found in critical condition on the kitchen floor. She was interviewed as soon as she was stable, and had the ability to talk about what happened. The following is the conversation between Mrs. Sanderson and Constable Wilder about the events of October 26th. I was making a special dinner because my Gwen was coming home for the weekend, and I wanted her to feel like she never left. Heath and Paul were upstairs playing their video games, and Kenna was in the living room doing some cleaning to get ready. I kept hearing her talking to herself. Well, I should say, I heard her talking to the mirror. I'm sorry, I thought you said she was afraid of mirrors. She was. For most of the time, she was with us. But she had a turnaround after a recent hospital stay. She seemed to find comfort in the mirrors after that, and carried a compact mirror around with her wherever she went. Her teachers were concerned because she had started talking to it at school. What kind of things did she talk about? It varied, actually. She would sometimes tell it to be quiet, get into an argument, or sometimes she would whisper to it about not wanting to hurt or not wanting to hurt someone. Didn't you think to inform her doctor? The doctor said that her confronting the mirror was an improvement and didn't seem overly disturbed by anything. He just told us that increasing the medication a little would keep her calm and she would get over everything. I see. Please continue. Right, well, I was chopping the vegetables. I heard Kenna scream and a loud crash from the other room. When I went to find out what had happened, I saw her sitting on the floor with pieces of my grandmother's antique mirror all over the place. She had a few shards caught in her hair and sticking out of the skin on her face and arms. There were also some minor cuts on her clothes, but jeans are pretty hardy, and that black turtleneck of hers is fairly thick, so I imagine the pieces just got stuck. Anyways, the mirror looked like it had exploded somehow. Any ideas on what could have happened? Did Kenna say anything about it? No, not about the mirror. All she said was that she heard something buzzing, and it wasn't stopping. But I couldn't hear anything. I thought it might have been a result of some head trauma because of the mirror, so I just took her to the kitchen where I could keep an eye on her and call the ambulance. All right, what happened next? She dropped the glass and started crying, clutching at her head in pain, covering her ears and screaming for it to stop. I thought I'd take the chance to get the glass away from her, but the screaming got worse and she snatched it from me. I think that's when she attacked me. You aren't sure? It's mostly a blur after that point, to be honest. There was so much pain that I wasn't really taking it all in. I know she stabs me 36 times, from what the doctor told me when I woke up. Anyways, that's when. Take your time, Mrs. Sanderson. I'm in no hurry. Would you like another glass of water? Heath and Paul came into the kitchen to find out what was going on with Kenna. They were very fond of her. Must have been worried. From the evidence we've uncovered, it seems as though the boys were contributing factors to her breakdown. Were you aware that they were bullying her? Are you going to trust what some lunatic wrote in some book over my boys who aren't here to defend themselves? The evidence? They were good boys. Do you want to know what happened or not? Yes, ma'am. Please, continue. As I was saying, my boys came to check on their dear foster sister. I remember her screeching like a banshee when she attacked Heath, and she stabbed him between the eyes. And then she went after Paul. Talking about the deaths of her children was understandably too much for the poor woman to handle. Mrs. Sanderson unfortunately never recovered from the incident, having suffered severe nerve damage, and is unable to perform basic tasks without difficulty. She's currently living in an undisclosed location with a live-in caregiver, and is undergoing intensive therapy sessions concerning her fear of the thin man and the fractured girl she had taken into her home. The rest of the Sanderson family was butchered. Heath Sanderson died instantly when the mirror fragment pierced his brain, and a large chunk broke off in his head. Paul was found in the living room, almost to the front door, and police believe he had been stabbed repeatedly in the back with a kitchen knife. By the blood on the floor, it seems he survived long enough to pull himself the rest of the way to the front door, but was unable to reach the knob. Finally, there was Gwen Sanderson, found upstairs in her old bedroom, halfway under her bed, as though she had been dragged out from under it. She'd been cut and mutilated with 13 pieces of the mirror jabbed all over her body, including 2 almost identical pieces lodged in the girl's eyes. Her face was frozen in sheer terror, her mouth stretched open in a silent scream as her hands clutched at her scratched cheeks, bits of skin under her nails. The autopsy revealed that she had actually died of a heart attack, and the investigators believed the mutilation had happened afterwards for the thrill of revenge. The case file for Kenna Blake was the most earth-shattering I had ever encountered as a social worker. It's an emotional job, full of turmoil and heartache, but isn't without its rewards when things go well. However, when things go wrong, it can be fatal. I will never forgive myself for what happened to that poor girl and to the family I placed her with. Kenna Blake, that fracture of a girl, has never been found. I know I'm not supposed to talk about this, but I just can't keep quiet. I need to tell someone about what happened to me and my fellow airmen back in early 2014. I was stationed at Kadena Air Force Base in Okinawa, Japan, and Uncle Sam had blessed us with the P-8 Poseidon, a modified Boeing 737 that the US Navy turned into a top-of-the-line surveillance plane. It was relatively new to the region, and nothing felt better than knowing that you were in the latest and greatest submarine patrol aircraft on the face of the Earth. It was loaded with tons of fun toys at our disposal to remind the People's Republic that we don't take kindly to it bullying our allies. We had torpedoes, depth charges, slammer missiles, harpoon anti-ship missiles, and surveillance equipment so powerful we felt like we were on first-name basis with half the staff at the PLAAF airbase on the Paracel Islands after only a couple of ops. It was like being the rich kid on the block, the one whose parents didn't just buy him a new bike, but instead went all out and bought him a Ducati. We had done some pretty standard flights in the first few months. Fly around the islands off Okinawa, maybe a patrol or two about 100 miles off the coast of mainland China, doing little more than dropping sonobuoys and intercepting a radio transmission or two that were nothing of note. Then word came down that we were to do a relatively close flyby of Hainan Island, following pretty much the same route that a Navy EP-3 flew during the infamous Hainan Island incident. Our briefing was pretty bare bones, but suffice to say, we were supposed to investigate a mysterious signal another patrol had encountered the day before, originating from somewhere in the ocean near Hainan. This route would give us 70 miles separation from Hainan's coastline and keep us 100 miles away from the PLAAF installation on the Paracel Islands. There was a little animosity amongst the crew, but bravado and rough humor diffused the situation pretty quickly. I recall our co-pilot suggesting that his life would be easier if he just deserted, went native, and took one of the local girls as his wife. My friendly reminder that he didn't speak a word of Japanese didn't stop him from informing me that I was welcome to fornicate with any local livestock I could find. Happy or not, we soon found ourselves loaded up on our Poseidon and heading along the same path that EP-3 took on that fateful day back in 2001. The trip to Hainan itself was quite boring, which was fine by me. We had been in the air for a little over 7 hours doing our regular business when we could see the coast of Hainan off in the distance. The trip had pretty much just consisted of scanning the radar to see civilian aircraft moving along their pathways, as was expected. When we reached the target area, we dropped 200 feet to drop sonobuoys and let the sensors do their thing, scanning the waters beneath us. 10 minutes crept by with not so much as a peep from my instrumental panel. Just as I was beginning to feel more relaxed, one of my sensors pinged a contact about 90 feet beneath the waves. The contact didn't fit the characteristics of any submarine I knew of, and it's my job to recognize the sonar signatures of submarines. For one, it was moving way more than what is expected of a submarine. The network of sonobuoys we had deployed picked up something clipping along at an unbelievable 300 knots. I did a double take. There's no nation in the world that has a sub that can go that fast. The Russians had one back in the Cold War that could maybe go 45 knots, but that was just ludicrous. It was weaving back and forth in a serpentine pattern so fast that it was jumping across the display. It was moving so fast that our systems couldn't even track it in real time. On top of all this, the signature was very faint. If we hadn't had top-of-the-line sensors on board, I doubt we would have been able to pick up the contact at all. There were two possibilities to explain the faint signature. Possibility A: the contact had some sort of a stealth capability that was doing the damnedest to fool our sensors. Possibility B: the contact was very small, maybe just a bit longer than the short bus the marine grunts take to work in the morning. I was mulling this over in my head when the contact disappeared from my screen. 3 of the sonoboys had stopped sending information, and as I reached for my comms, a 4th one went dark as well. Not good. I radioed the pilot and told him what I'd seen, asking that we double back to see if we could re-establish contact. He was happy to oblige. Pride runs deep in the Marine Patrol community, and you do not want to be known as the crew who lost a sub. We set a heading for the last known position and ready to drop more boys. As we neared the spot where contact was lost, my air radar let out a gentle beep, signifying the entrance of a new bogey in our airspace. I hunched over the display, watching as the blip careened from side to side in our direction while maintaining the same 300 knot velocity. It was so unexpected that I found myself unable to look away as the contact carried out maneuvers at an impossible 15 feet above the surface of the sea. Weird approach or not, this was an undeniable intercept course with our plane, and we would be close enough to shake hands in moments unless one of us changed course. The contact disappeared from display, snapping me out of my temporarily stupefied state. I quickly notified the pilot that we had company, about 45 seconds out. He acknowledged, but informed me that the skies were clear as far as he could see. The notion of equipment malfunction began to creep into my mind when the blip appeared once more. This time, it was at 200 feet, our exact operating altitude. It had made a huge distance gain on us in a short period of time. I heard the pilot scream in surprise before my whole world turned into a sudden whirlwind of turbulence. Without warning, the laws of physics decided that everything not bolted down needed to be in another part of the plane right now. Unfortunately, I was one of those objects. Our PA pulled up and banged starboard, sending me tumbling out of my chair and rolling towards the aft of the plane. I had taken off my safety harness when I visited the chem pod about 2 hours prior and had simply forgotten to put it back on. Yeah, I know it's regulation to be strapped in, and shame on me for not being by the book. Buckle yourself or go fuckle yourself, one of my instructors used to say. I was most definitely being fuckled right now. Engine 1 is out, the pilot yelled over the comms. I go back to my feet about 2 stations away from where I started. 3 meters doesn't seem like a long distance until you're ragdolled that distance with a sudden stop 5 seconds later. Another crew member offered an outstretched hand to help me stabilize, and I gratefully took it and started to make my way back to my seat. Bandits making another pass. Brace! The plane shuddered as it bit into a hard turn, stalling my attempt to return to my post. I was about to try and inch my way back to the safety of my seat when the whole station was torn apart from my eyes. When the whole station was torn apart before my eyes. Bullets ripped through the fuselage, sending fragments of metal and plastic flying in all directions. I dropped to the ground, covering my head with my arms, as a shower of sparks and debris rained all around me. It was over in seconds. Well, by over, I mean I wasn't getting shot at anymore. We still were in full-on evasive maneuvers, and I needed to find somewhere to bunker down before I got tossed again. I located a fortunately placed grab handle I could brace myself against. Feeling a little more in control of my destiny, I looked around to get my bearings. I was at the midship emergency exit hatch, just over the port side wing. There was a porthole window on this door. You know, the little window you're supposed to look through to make sure you aren't escaping into a fire? And it was giving me the most unsettling view of the attack I could imagine. "He's back," Look out! I didn't need the warning. I could see our assailant clear as day through my window. I was stunned to see that it was an old prop-powered fighter plane. It was a dark green color with a large red circle just behind the cockpit on the fuselage. I'm no historian, but I know a World War II Japanese plane when I see one. Growing up, I had quite the fascination with these old planes, but now, my childhood dreams had manifested themselves as a lethal nightmare. The fighter came at us in an obtuse angle attack run, catching up to our bird with little effort, most likely facilitated by us only being powered by one engine now. I could recognize the type of plane at this point. It was a Mitsubishi A5M carrier-based fighter. Just like the model one I used to have hanging from a fishing line in my childhood bedroom. Twin flashes pulsated along its underbelly as it let loose with a machine gun armament peppering our tail section and rudder. Controls are down, boys. This isn't good. Like a vulture sweeping in on carrion, the Proto-Zero performed a lazy gliding turn and set course to intersect with us once more. Shockingly, the expected kill shot didn't come. Instead, I saw the fighter pull up alongside us and match our speed like you see in old World War movies, where a pilot pulls up in his defeated foe to look him in the eye and decide his fate. But nothing about this felt like an honorable aerial duel of yore. When the plane reached its mark alongside our bird, I was able to get a look at it. Well, the seemingly empty space where there was supposed to be a pilot. A faint blue glow was emanating from within while shadows danced across the glass panes of the canopy. I was completely transfixed, mesmerized as a child would be by fireworks. Then I saw the hand. Amidst the playful light, a hand clawed at the bullet-resistant glass as though something within was attempting to break out. The owner of the hand made an appearance soon after. It was a young man, no older than 20, rising up from the cramped pilot's compartment and blearily looking around as if he wasn't entirely sure where he was. Finally, he looked right in my direction, his face a twisted mask of pain and sorrow, but overlaid with a hint of surprise, as though he just realized he was attacking another plane. His hand snapped to attention, grabbing at what must have been where the flight controls were located. He frantically pulled at them, throwing the full weight of his body against the controls, but to no avail. He turned to me, and I could see him yelling, his mouth agape while his breath left patches of fog against the canopy. He banged against the glass for about 20 seconds in a vain attempt to free himself from his high-speed prison. Sobbing, he stopped and stared into my eyes. He began to write something on the fogged glass, but I could hardly make it out. I thought I knew what it said, but before I could be positive, the plane veered sharply away. I watched him leave with dread. This wasn't the type of turn you would typically see when a pilot was breaking off engagement. This was one of those hard turns, aggressive and mean and full of flight. The fighter was going to make another pass while we sailed along with one engine and a badly damaged rudder. Sitting duck always sounds like a fun expression, until you are the sitting duck. Worse still is knowing that you are a sitting duck leading up to a kill shot. Second after excruciating second slide by while you wait for the inevitable. He's coming in for the kill, and he's brought a friend. That made my stomach turn. 2 of them? Looks like we're sailing the Poo-Poo River without a boat, let alone a paddle. There was no way we could. I stuck by my window, and sure enough, the A5M entered into a visual range before long. His friend wasn't an A5M at all. In fact, it was a Corsair, another old fighter, but one that had been used by American carriers. Apparently, the years hadn't cooled things between them as they danced before me, guns blazing away. Their dogfight took them all over the place. One erratic turn would send them racing in our direction, while another would push them further away. I took a good look at the Corsair as it made a pass. It had the same blue light coming from it as the first fighter did. Something gnawing at the back of my mind told me that if I were to see a pilot inside the American plane, he wouldn't be any happier than the Japanese one was. They were both prisoners to the bloodthirsty spirits that had taken up residence inside their warbirds. The dogfight continued to ebb and flow both towards us and away, but there was a gradual trend of them getting further and further away. After about 5 minutes, they were just specks on the horizon. You could lose them from sight every now and then before making out the flash of machine gun fire and locating them again. As for us, we limped back to our base in Okinawa. The whole crew was pretty shaken up, and it was quite the treat to explain to our superiors how a World War II aircraft flown by a blue light knocked the crap out of us over the South China Sea. But that was all okay, because we were rescued by another World War II aircraft flown by the same blue light. The whole crew was sent for one-on-one debriefings, and even the ground crew we interacted with were brought in to make sure they knew what did and did not happen. Nothing happened as far as the Navy was concerned. We were sworn to secrecy and reminded about how the government could find very, very deep, dark holes to dispose of annoying people. I just can't stop thinking of that young pilot's face though. I still have nightmares about what happened, but in my dreams, I can make out what that Japanese pilot was writing on the cockpit's glass. It says, "Forgive me." He's begging for forgiveness so he can be released from his living hell. Deep down, I know that those two pilots may never find peace, and they're still out there, fighting and suffering. Last year on Boxing Day, I found a really cool ornament in a clearance box. It had a built-in camera to record unique perspectives on your holiday celebrations. I grabbed the last one from the store's dusty shelf and brought it home for less than $10. I forgot about it until my wife, my 2 daughters, and I decorated the house earlier this month. I told my daughters about the camera and said we'd secretly catch Santa in the act. I had an old costume in the attic and intended to deliver some gifts in full view of the camera on Christmas night. My girls were overjoyed and went back and forth trying to find the best place to put the ornament on the tree. They had no idea Daddy repositioned it later so it could catch the living room at a good angle. In the nights leading up to Christmas, I turned the camera on to make sure everything was working properly. In the morning, I previewed the footage, just long enough to confirm the thing was working. Satisfied, I inserted the microSD card back into the ornament, and slipped in a new battery in anticipation for the big night. Daddy didn't want to disappoint his girls with a failed recording. We enjoyed Christmas Eve as a family, playing board games and eating way more junk food than there was room in our stomachs for. Like we do every year, we let our daughters open one gift from Mommy and Daddy before going to bed. The girls, still riding their sugar high, could be heard giggling in their bedrooms from all the way up the stairs. From time to time, my wife and I could hear one of them shush the other, claiming she'd heard hoofs on the roof or bells jingling. Eventually, our kiddos dozed off. My wife kissed me on the cheek and headed to bed, while I turned off all the lights. I retrieved the costume and tiptoed to the living room, getting ready for my big feature film debut. I did everything you would expect Santa to do. I ate most of the cookies, I drank the milk, I pet my large stomach and said ho ho ho, and I dropped a few presents by the fireplace, all in view of the camera. A pretty good acting job, if I do say so myself. On Christmas morning, the girls came running into our bedroom to wake us up. They excitedly insisted we watch the video before opening the presents. I transferred the footage to my laptop, forwarded to where Santa showed up, and pressed play. My girls squealed with delight and jumped in front of the screen, frantically waving at Santa while obscuring the video from my view. It brought me so much joy to see how happy the girls were. I was too lazy to stop the video, so it continued to play in the background while we unwrapped our gifts. I spotted a box I had not seen the night before. It was small and wrapped in a blue foil paper I didn't recognize. My name was on it, but my wife seemed as surprised as I was to see it there. Noticing my confusion, my youngest daughter spoke. "Daddy, that's gotta be from Mr. Elf," she said, her voice cheerful and bright. I was ready to dismiss her elf comment as just another weird thing kids say, but my wife wasn't so quick to ignore it. "Honey, what elf?" she asked. My daughter pointed to the laptop. By then, the video had ended, and all that was left on the screen was a preview of the first frame. "The one that came with Santa," she answered. Panic struck me like a bird in a jet propeller. I know my wife didn't dress up as an elf. I scanned the video, clicking forward and back until I saw what my daughter had seen. There was someone in the living room. He walked into the corner after I had turned the lights off. He stood there, watching me parading around as Santa. The video went completely quiet after that. It was as though the camera failed to record a single sound. The strange, tall man in an elf costume stood perfectly still for over an hour, watching the camera from a distance. After a while, he walked over to the plate of cookies and bit the head off a gingerbread man. I glanced at the plate and saw his teeth mark on the decapitated cookie. The man then quietly approached the Christmas tree. I thought the audio wasn't working, but as he reached the tree, I began hearing his slow and steady breaths. He reached towards the ornament, and the video stopped. In a terrified frenzy, I grabbed the blue box he'd left behind. I ripped the bow off it and tossed the filthy thing away. I frantically removed the wrapping paper, opened the box, and looked inside. There, on a bed of bubble wrap, was the battery I'd put in the camera the night before. My wife took the ornament and opened the back. The battery was missing. I don't know what scares me more. What the camera caught, or what the elf might have done after he turned off the camera. This happened about 4 years ago. At the time, I was around 8 months pregnant and was doing some Christmas shopping at the local mall. It was around 9 at night. I finished up my shopping and headed out of the mall towards my truck. At this mall, there's a road that goes around the mall and parking is on the other side of this road. Therefore, you have to cross the road to get to the parking area. As I'm leaving the store, I happen to notice a man standing in the middle of the road. He looked in my direction and made eye contact. I looked away and kept going. At the time, there are 2 other men that walked past him to go into the mall. He never looks at them or says anything to them, but he kept his eyes on me. I noticed that he started to walk in my direction, but I just kept on strolling to my vehicle. Then I hear,
"Excuse me, can you help me?"
Being Southern has its downfalls, and one of those is having it ingrained into you to be polite. I simply asked, "What do you need?" He looked around and said,
"Could you help me start my car? I think my battery's dead."
I may be Southern, but I'm not that polite, nor am I stupid. Please remember that I'm very much pregnant and a woman walking alone in a parking lot. If he was really having car trouble, is it really likely that he would ask a pregnant woman for help rather than 2 men that had just walked past him? Doubtful. At this point, I know it's time to go, so I just said, "Sorry, I can't help." I keep on walking, a little faster this time. I still see him out of the corner of my eye, following me. I have my keys out and I'm ready to go as soon as I make it to the truck. He's still coming.
"You really aren't gonna help me? I just need a jump."
Again, I say, "Nope, sorry." Finally, I get to the truck, unlock it, and jump in. He's practically running towards me now. I lock the doors and try to get the key in the ignition, but I was shaking, and at that moment the damn key just would not fit into the ignition. He gets to the truck and hits my window saying,
"I just need your help for a minute."
Now I'm starting to get angry and yell, "No, get the hell away from me." He grabs the door handle and tries to open my door and screams, "Just open the door." I have my concealed carry license because there have been other reasons that I needed protection that I won't go into here. However, I did have a 38 special in my console that I know how to use. When he tried to open my door, my only thought was to protect my child and myself. I rolled the window down, grabbed the 38, and pointed it right in his face and said, "I'm not gonna tell you again. Get the fuck away from me." He stood there for a moment in shock, I'm sure. In that moment, time stopped. I didn't know what he would do, but I knew that I was prepared to use this gun if he made any move toward me. He didn't. He didn't say a word. He turned and ran. I know I should have gotten the hell out of Dodge then, but I couldn't. All I could do was just sit there in shock. I was terrified of not only what he may have done to me, had I not felt that something was wrong, but also that I had just threatened to kill someone. Not a situation I ever want to be in again. However, should it happen, I still have that 38, and it's loaded and ready to go. So, man at the mall, I hope we never meet again. When I moved away to college, things got really shitty for me. You see, I'm a really quiet person and I find it really hard to make friends with people. For the most part, I just don't see the point. I don't really like anyone I've ever met. I don't know. And when I moved there, they just didn't happen. They didn't go well for me. Things were just terrible. They were at an all-time low. And college was really hard, and I was struggling to pay rent. I didn't know what I was going to do. One night, I decided I was going to kill myself. I walked to a nearby bridge with the intent of jumping off. When I got there, it was really dark. There were only a few lights around, barely lighting up the area around me. I thought back on my life, and I realized I had nothing to live for. I didn't know what I was doing, barely even cared about my major in college, my grades were slipping, I had no friends, my family didn't care about me. I closed my eyes as I anticipated to jump off. I wasn't sure if I was going to do it. I leaned forward more and more with each passing second. I was going to do it. That was when I heard a woman's voice screaming at me to stop from behind me. Honestly, it kind of startled me and I fell down and it was kind of awkward. She came over to talk and I could tell she pitied me. She could see easily that I really wasn't anything special. But regardless, we became friends. And as things went on, we got closer and closer. Eventually, it got to the point where we were really close. Believe it or not, befriending this one girl actually helped me to change my life. I completely did a 180, and within 2 years, I had all A's. I had quite a few friends, and I made her my girlfriend. Things could not have gotten better. And that was what our entire relationship was based off of. Things were amazing, and they continued to be amazing for 4 or 5 years. We ended up getting a small house in the country. We both got high-paying jobs, and things could not have gotten better. Sometimes I think back to when my life almost ended that night, imagining what would have happened if she wasn't there. I'd probably be dead. Now, there are a couple reasons, some of which are my fault, but the main reason was that she wasn't herself anymore. She used to be so happy and positive, and she always helped me to become a better person. But now she was this shell of a human being, and she wouldn't talk to me. She wouldn't tell me what was wrong. I don't know what happened to her, but something changed. That was when weird things started to happen, and I keep thinking back to how they all happened and realize I should have seen it coming, but I don't think anyone wanted to see it coming. I started finding dead animals around our property. Sometimes they would be horribly mutilated, and I didn't know what to think. A couple separate occasions I asked her about it, but she always seemed to brush it off. But one day, there was a dead dog, horribly mutilated, that was right in our front porch. When I asked her about it, she said she didn't notice it. Now, there was no way you didn't see this thing. It was right on the front porch, and she left for work that day. There was no fucking way she didn't see that thing. That was when I knew she was hiding something from me. I don't know what exactly she did, but I started to get suspicious that she was a serial killer or something. That's what serial killers do, right? They torture animals. I know it was weak of me, but I just bought her shitty excuse and I went on with my life. I know, looking back, I should have left her then and there, or called the police, or had her mentally evaluated or something, but I just didn't. By this time, we had been emotionally separated for 3 years. We still lived together, and occasionally we partook in romance, but it really wasn't anything special, and I know she felt the same way. It was around this time that I got friendly with a girl from a local bar. We became friends, and one thing led to another. I started pouring my heart out, and we ended up having sex, and honestly, it felt so good. It felt so good to feel like I was actually doing it with a real person and not some fucking robot. I did still feel guilty though. I betrayed my wife. I shouldn't have done that. If I really felt that disappointed with my wife, I should have just left her. But I stayed for all the wrong reasons. The next time I saw her, she could tell that I was feeling guilty, and surprisingly enough, she didn't seem to care. I confessed to her that I had cheated on her with a girl, and I said that it would never happen again, and that we needed to work on our marriage. She seemed fine, but looking back, she was anything but fine. We made an appointment to see a marriage counselor, and everything seemed to be fine after that. That was until one day I was watching the news, and I saw a woman who was brutally murdered, horribly disfigured. Everything about her body was burnt. It was the worst thing I had ever seen in my life. She was so disfigured and fucked up, and it was honestly disgusting. But I recognized her face. It was the girl from the bar. That was when I knew I had to get out. I started seeing more and more dead animals around the property, and one day I came home from work to see a dead bird, horribly cut up and disfigured, and I just turned around and I left. I went to my parents' house and I called my wife to let her know that I was leaving her and I was never coming back. That was probably the bravest thing I had ever done in my life. She sounded really weird on the phone. Not in the sense that she overreacted or anything. She barely reacted at all. Eventually, I found a small apartment in a nice secluded area, and I tried getting on with my life. A couple days ago, I noticed something. I noticed that there were dead animals showing up around where I lived. I knew it was her. I knew she was there. I'm really fucking scared, and I don't know what I'm gonna do next. This took place after my parents had divorced, but they lived close to each other, so it wasn't all bad. Anyway, I would frequently forget stuff at my mom's house and would take it up to my dad's house. This was almost a nightly thing. So, one night, I was bringing my Xbox and some games to my dad's house, and one thing to note is that this was one of those double houses, if that makes any sense. Anyway, to get to my dad's house, I had to pass their side first. While I was passing their house, the presumed wife stopped me and asked me to come closer. I thought that since my dad shared houses with her and her husband that he knew and trusted her, so I went. She noticed the Xbox and games in my hands and straight up said,
"Hey, we have a bunch of fun games and little boys your age that will play with you in here. Do you want to come in?"
I slowly backed away, not turning my head to her. As I was doing so, I felt a cold, large hand on my right shoulder. My blood ran cold. I didn't dare turn around. I heard from behind me,
"She isn't this nice all the time. I suggest you take her up on her offer."
My fight or flight kicked in, and I chose flight. His grip wasn't all that good, so I escaped easily and ran inside. I didn't tell my dad, but I did call the police. I couldn't live knowing that they could have multiple kids in there. A few minutes passed and a police car showed up. 5 minutes later, the 2 officers walked out of the house with the 2 people. Apparently, they'd been luring kids into their house with the promise of games and toys. I still imagine what would have happened if the man's grip was stronger, and thank God I chose to call the police. They had 2 kids in the house, both boys. So, creepy couple who lure kids into their house, let's never meet again. To give some background information, this event occurred a little over a year ago and I still haven't been able to even begin to get over it. I'm a 22-year-old female. I'm a 22-year-old 5'4" female, and at the time I was 21. My family and I had recently moved to a new town that was a fair amount more rural than the town that we had previously lived in, and our new house was a large ranch-style house with a basement. I was home from college, and my parents had left for a week to celebrate their wedding anniversary with their friends who lived several miles away. Before I continue, I'll give you a quick layout of the house so that you'll be able to imagine the setting a bit more clearly. There were 3 doors which led into the house, one on the front porch, a sliding glass door on the back porch, and another door on the other side of the wall from my bedroom which led into the garage and basement. When you walk out of the bedroom and turn, you can see all the way across the house to the door of my parents' bedroom and the stairs leading up from the basement. It had been a few days since my parents left, and I hadn't had any problems. They had sent me a couple messages on Facebook letting me know that they arrived to their friend's house safely and were having a good time. The day had gone well, and I was sure to check that I'd locked all the doors of the house once the sun started to go down. It was about 11 p.m., and I was doing my nightly routine of laying in bed and messing around on the computer when I suddenly got this sinking feeling of dread. I felt as if I was being watched. It was summer and we didn't have AC, so I had a large box fan in the window blowing the cool night air into my stiflingly hot room. But once that feeling settled over me, I decided that I should remove the fan and close the window, just in case. Once I removed the fan, shutting and locking the window and pulling down the curtain, I felt a bit better. However, I still couldn't shake the feeling of dread. I lay back in my bed and tried to continue what I was doing, though I didn't put my headphones back on. After a few minutes, I began to hear something that sounded like light scratching. I sat still in bed, listening to the sound, trying to pinpoint what it was and if I recognized it at all. Our new house, although relatively close in distance to our neighbors, had a fair amount of forest around it, so I thought the scratching may have been an animal or someone's dog that got loose and wanted to come inside. After a few minutes, the scratching stopped and everything returned to silence. So I figured that I was probably right and that it must have been an animal. My relief was short-lived. As soon after the scratching stopped from the other side of the wall, I began to hear slow footsteps descending into the basement. This is when I knew I was completely fucked. There was no way I could get out of the house without walking past the basement stairs. We didn't have a house phone, and at the time, I was in the process of getting a new cell phone because mine was broken beyond repair. I sat there for a few seconds wondering what the hell I should do. I knew that I would need to get out of the house as soon as possible, and that the more time I wasted, the worse it would be for me. I contemplated popping the screen out of my window and jumping out, but it was far enough off the ground that there was a good chance I would end up getting hurt if I did. Not to mention that if I jumped out the window and hurt myself, I wouldn't be able to run for help, and I would be right next to the door that whoever was in my house had gone in through. So I decided to very carefully and quietly open my door and peek out around the corner. And if the coast was clear, I would make a mad dash for the front door and sprint to my neighbor's house. I very slowly opened my bedroom door, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness of the house before creeping around the corner and looking to see if I was safe to make a run for it. What I saw nearly made me vomit. As my eyes scanned the house, I noticed that something was off. I squinted hard as I looked over the basement stairs and was able to make out the shape of a man. What made it worse? He wasn't just standing at the top of the stairs. He was fucking crawling up them like some kind of nightmare creature. I quickly backed into my room again, shutting and locking the door as quietly as I could. I didn't think he'd seen me, but there was no way that I was going to make a run for it now. My only choice was to pop the screen and jump out the window. As I was unlocking and opening my window, I heard the handle to my bedroom door turn. Once the man realized it was locked, in a sickeningly sweet sing-song voice he cooed,
"I know you're in there."
Then he started throwing himself at full force against my door. I ripped the screen out of the window and flung myself out. I landed wrong on my right foot and I was sure that I'd hurt my ankle, but at the time I couldn't think of anything other than getting as far away as possible. I got up and ran as fast as I could to my neighbor's house, knocking on their door in a panicked frenzy and ringing the doorbell over and over again. I looked over at my house as I was yelling for my neighbors to let me in, and I swear to fucking God, I could see the man standing at my window, waving at me. My neighbors finally opened the door after what felt like forever, and I managed to explain well enough what was going on for them to let me in and call the police. I stayed with them until the police arrived. The police searched my house and found that the lock to my basement had been picked, and that the door to my bedroom was hanging off the hinges. They weren't able to find the man anywhere, and because I had only seen him for a split second in the dark, I couldn't provide them with a good description of him. Of course, I got into contact with my parents immediately, and they hurried home. The police took my statement and searched the area for the man, but of course they came up with nothing. After this event, my parents and I were sure to add deadbolt locks to the door leading into the basement and to the door leading out of the basement to the rest of the house. They also helped me to pay to get a new phone. What really bothers me about all of this is that nothing was stolen. There wasn't even any evidence that the guy had looked through anything while he'd been in my house. So, psycho who broke into my house knowing that I was home, let's not meet again. For 2 years, I lived the life of careless sex and debauchery that comes with being a man-whore. I would make passes at anything with a pulse, going out of my way to weasel into my mark's heart in order to weasel into their pants. I made it a habit never to sleep with the same girl twice, and I kept an ongoing tally of how many women I could hook up with in a week. I wasn't always like this. Going into my first year of high school, I was the poster child for monogamous relationships. I looked down on people who threw their bodies crotch first at anything that moved, and spoke my mind against it publicly on numerous occasions. As a freshman, I dated a girl named Sarah for about a year before she broke my heart over summer break. I was devastated well into my sophomore year and spent most of my time moping around in a constant state of self-pity. but I snapped out of it when I met Joy. I knew she was something special from the moment I took her out on our first date, and when we had our first kiss, I was certain that she was the one I wanted to spend my life with. Unfortunately, she did not feel the same. We dated for 2 years before I discovered that she was cheating on me with someone from her church youth group. I was destroyed once more, and vowed then and there that if broken hearts were destined to happen in relationships, I would be the one breaking them. Starting my senior year, I was a sexual force to be reckoned with. Girls who were slighted by me would warn their friends, but I would inevitably charm my way into the heart of any girl I chose before shattering it to bits. The gratification was indescribable. Each kill was a rush. I was a monster. This trend carried into my first year of college, though my notoriety decreased slightly. There were plenty of frat boys playing the same game I was. Nevertheless, I rebuilt my reputation from scratch. I was jokingly given the name Virgin Slayer in some circles, and it stuck. I porked my way through my entire freshman year, my body count bordering on some 200 women, up until just before finals week. That's when I met Danielle. The moment I met Danielle, I knew that I would never want any other girl again. She was absolutely stunning, with short brown hair, cute pixie style, accented by the most gorgeous pair of blue eyes I have ever seen. When she laughed, the corners of those eyes would crinkle up and my heart would melt. I decided then and there to introduce myself. Unfortunately, my reputation preceded me. She recognized me immediately and told me to fuck off. Despite this, I was determined to prove myself worthy. I went out of my way to show her that I truly cared for her. I bought her flowers, I wrote songs and poetry, and publicly swore that I would cast aside my luxurious life if she would be mine. Reluctant dates turned into midnight rendezvous. Midnight rendezvous turned into dinner dates with her parents, and somewhere along the way, we fell in love. I was head over heels for Danielle, and one look into those beautiful blue eyes told me that she felt the same for me. One woman turned my entire life upside down in an instant, and I was grateful for it every day. I was never happier than when I was with Danielle. For our sophomore year, we decided to give living together a shot. After saving up some summer wages and dipping into savings, we managed to secure ourselves a cozy little apartment near campus. Days were spent living the busy lives of college students, going from classes in the mornings to work in the afternoons to afford rent. Nights, however, were made up for it. We would spend evenings together on the couch with a movie on in the background, but ultimately, it would devolve into giggling and kissing, and me just looking at her, drinking in her beautiful face, transfixed by the blue eyes that had caused me to fall in love with her. Late into our second semester, Danielle had to leave to visit the next state over. According to a phone call from her parents, her grandmother that lived there was in very poor health and was fading fast, and they wanted her to be there for her in her final days. Danielle was distraught and spent several hours sobbing into my shoulder as I ran my hands through her hair, assuring her that it would be okay. I helped her pack her bag for her trip and drove her to the bus stop to see her off. I was sad to see her go, but I understood that family had to come first. I managed to keep myself distracted for the first part of the day with school and work, but when night fell, I realized just how lonely the apartment was without Danielle. I sat on the couch, watching a DVD but not really paying attention to it, thinking of how much I missed the love of my life. She had texted me an hour or so earlier to tell me that she was headed into an area with terrible reception and that communications would be limited for a while. I texted back that I understood and added on an I love you with a question mark, prompting a response, but receiving none. Completely out of distractions, I opened my laptop to check my Facebook when my phone vibrated. 2 short bursts, a text message. I reached over eagerly, hoping for word from Danielle, but the caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. The text was 4 words long. Do you remember Sydney? I scratched my neck and racked my brain. Sydney. The name didn't really ring any bells. I was about to close my phone when it vibrated again in my hand. The same number had sent another message. Do you remember Nisha? There was a name I recognized. Nisha was a Russian exchange student from my senior year of high school, one of the many conquests from my previous life. I typed her name into Facebook and pulled up her profile. There were numerous wall posts with different variations of "Pray for Nisha" or "I hope they find her soon." Apparently, she had gone on a camping trip and had been missing ever since. As I scrolled through her page, my phone buzzed again. I unlocked the screen. Do you remember Tasha? I fiddled with my lip, thinking, the name sounded familiar. After a little thought, I placed it as one of the sorority girls I associated with in my freshman year of college, dated her for a week to gain her trust, nailed her, and never called her again. I pulled up her Facebook page. Much to my surprise, it was very similar to Nisha's. Tasha had gotten tickets through a radio contest for a cruise, but somehow got lost between her home and the ship. There was apparently no record of her even signing in for the boat ride. My heart began to beat faster in my chest. This was too weird to be simple coincidence. My phone buzzed once more. Do you remember Lydia? I didn't bother to try to remember. I typed the name into my Facebook search bar and clicked the first result. Another college mark, missing for a month. My heart raced. My phone buzzed again and kept buzzing through the night. Do you remember Devin? Disappeared camping. Do you remember Erica? Left for the beach for the weekend. Never came home. Do you remember Raven? Cheyenne? Monica? Name after name appeared in my phone's inbox, and name after name turned up missing on Facebook. Everyone I had ever been involved with was gone, and had been gone for weeks. I had to know what was going on. I opened my computer's recent search history and cross-referenced the names I had looked up with the girls in my contacts, barring my mother, aunt, and Danielle. The only name that was left over was Erin Morgan. I put my shaking hands to my face to gather my thoughts. Erin. It suddenly clicked. Erin was the girl from the school library. Small girl, very bookish, with thick glasses and a hair-triggered temper. I pursued her for months until she finally relented and slept with me. Then I dropped her like a ton of bricks. After accidentally running into her on campus one afternoon, I made it a point to steer clear of her. The look she gave me that day was pure venom. Typically, the girls I played would take it in stride and count it as a loss, but if looks could kill, I would have been dead in an instant. Her eyes had seethed pure, unadulterated hatred. I shook my head. Now wasn't the time to get lost in my thoughts. Clearly, Erin Morgan was behind whatever was going on here. She had gotten a new phone, relocated, and started picking off my ex-lovers. I had to call the cops. Would they even believe me? It didn't matter. Something needed to be done. I picked up my phone and was about to make the call when it buzzed again. A picture mail. I opened it. Do you remember Danielle? My heart stopped, terrified of what I might see. I opened the phone attachment. Laying on the ground in a pool of blood was the most gorgeous pair of blue eyes I had ever seen. I grew up in rural Michigan and rode the bus to school every morning. We lived in a house at the bottom of a hill on a country road. My bus stop, however, was at the top of the hill after you passed my house. The story I'm about to tell you was when I was about 7 or 8 years old. I woke up one morning and got ready for school like I usually did. My bus picked me up around 7 a.m., right when the sun was starting to come up a little, but there were still spots of darkness deep in the woods. I was the only kid who was picked up at my bus stop, so I would stand at the edge of the woods and wait until the bus came. My mom or dad would have to drop me off about 5 minutes before the bus came and hightail it to work in order to make it there by 8. It's not that they felt completely comfortable doing this, but they didn't have many options. We lived in a safe area, or so we thought, and the bus arrived on time 99% of the time, so they weren't too worried that anything would happen to me in the 5 minutes I was left alone. So, standing there, cold as shit, waiting on the bus to come, watching the sun rise slowly in the sky. It's still a little dark out, but yet, bright enough for me to see what's around me. I saw the lights of the bus in the distance, on time, as usual, and it came to a stop right in front of me. My bus driver, Mrs. Teresa, opened the door and said good morning, and gestured for me to hop on. I walked to my seat and put my stuff down, but noticed that the bus wasn't moving yet. Mrs. Teresa still had the door ajar, and she just sat there, leaning slightly out of her seat, staring into the woods. After a good minute or so, we were off and on our way to school after picking up a few more kids. Arriving at school, Mrs. Teresa escorted us in, which is something she never did, and I remember seeing her slip into the office and talking to one of the secretaries. I went through my regular school day and was picked up by my dad by the car rider line as normal. When he picked me up though, he started asking me all kinds of questions. Bus pickup go okay this morning? And did any car stop or blow the horn at you as you waited? Strange questions that he never asked me before. That next morning, my parents didn't take me to the bus stop. Mom dropped me off at school before going into work at a later time. This continued, alternating a drop-off by mom or dad for the remainder of the school year. At the time, I noticed they changed my bus stop. Years later, I found out why my bus driver went into the school that day, and why my bus stop was relocated. When Mrs. Teresa picked me up that morning, she saw a man standing in the woods behind where I was, just staring at me. She alerted the school secretary, who alerted the transportation office for the school district, and then the police. The police investigated and found some items wrapped up in a t-shirt back in the woods. A hunting knife, a rope, a rag, a washcloth, and tape. The police never found out who that shit belonged to, but my bus driver, my parents, and the police felt certain that whoever it belonged to had the worst intentions for me. I think about this day often and wonder what would have happened to me had my bus driver been a few minutes late, or had she not noticed the man standing in the woods after I boarded the bus. Because of this incident, the school district changed my bus stop to be located right in front of my house. That way, I could stay in my house until the bus pulled up. No more standing by the woods for me. I resumed riding the bus the next school year. Creepy bus stop man? Let's not meet. And thank you to Mrs. Teresa for probably saving my life.